Let's talk about vampires. I want to do a tier list. I want to find out who are the greatest of all time. This is inspired by Renfield. You might see the ad up there. I'm doing a sponsored stream right now on Twitch about it. And I'm really excited about Renfield coming out. And I want to know where he's going to stack up. Where is Nicolas Cage's Dracula going to stack up? Is it going to be the greatest of all time? Is it going to be authentic? Is it going to be camptastic, right? Kind of cheesy. Or is it going to be totally absurd, right? Laughable. And I've got a list of vampires here. I don't know all of them. I haven't seen every Dracula and vampire movie out there, contrary to what it looks like around here. But I have seen a good deal of these. I've seen at least a row or two of these vampires and Draculas. Let's talk about them. Let's start off. I believe the oldest Dracula vampire that we have on here is Nosferatu. I think the best vampire Dracula that you can get is going to be authentic, campy, and absurd. I think it's going to be all three. I think that's what makes you the GOAT. I think Nosferatu is authentic. I think that they did such a good job with that film. I mean, it's iconic. If you've ever watched the old silent movie, I mean, you could believe it was real. So much to the point, I believe what we have on here is William Dafoe's reimagining of Nosferatu later on in Shadows of the Vampire. This is one of my favorite portrayals of a vampire on screen because it takes what we had in Nosferatu and it adds in a little more campiness, a little more absurdity. And I think it actually elevates it into this, GOAT status, right? William Dafoe as Nosferatu in Shadows of the Vampire, which if you're not familiar with, is a movie with John Malkovich, where he plays the director of the Nosferatu movie. And so it's like a film inside a film. It's like the making of, it's not a documentary. I feel I have to explain this to my wife every time I'm going to get her to watch a movie. I'm like, no, it's not a documentary. This is a real movie with actors in it. And so William Dafoe is portraying. And the story is that to make the movie, they found an actual vampire. And so William Dafoe is playing a real vampire being filmed by a Hollywood director to make, a German director, not a Hollywood director. It's a German silent film. To make this movie using a real vampire. And William Dafoe is so convincing in this role and so great that you believe, I bought it. I thought he was fantastic. The greatest of all time. One of the greatest vampire performances. Now you got to stack that up against Bela Lugosi, right? It's easy to put him down in even the absurd or campy because we're looking at it from the future into the past, right? But I think he's right up there with the original Nosferatu. I think so. I wouldn't say that Bela Lugosi, I mean, look, it might be criminal not to give Bela Lugosi GOAT status. But I don't know if he's quite, maybe I should. Because it is kind of campy, right? It is kind of absurd, but also kind of not. He does play it pretty straight. It's a pretty straight portrayal and pretty iconic. I think I'm going to keep it in the authentic. I think it's been topped in the years to come. Which is where we're going to start talking about, Count Chocula. How does Count Chocula stack up against your Nosferatus, your William Dafoe's, your Bela Lugosi's? I'm not much of a fan of breakfast cereal in general. I've kind of given the stuff up. So I don't have the fondness for Count Chocula that most have. You got to give him a little bit of credit. He's not absurd. I mean, Count Chocula, if I ran into a cereal eating vampire in a dark alleyway, I think I would still kind of worry for my life. You know, it's a little concerning. You know, how is he getting by on chocolate breakfast cereal and not blood? How does that work? I'm not sure. So yeah, I think I'm going to keep him. I think I'm going to keep him a little campy here. Not quite absurd. What's absurd is you know, the Twilight vampires. We all agree that the Twilight vampires have given vampires a bad name. Vampires had to claw their way back up for some time over the travesty that was Twilight. It took a lot of time to kind of come back after that. And I think we agree that, you know, Count Chocula is clearly more menacing than Edward Cullen. I think everybody agrees that. Now, I will say, I don't know if this is possible to have something, you know, now make something in the past look better in retrospect. Robert Pattinson as Batman is pretty great. Robert Pattinson as Batman is pretty great. But Robert Pattinson as a teenage vampire, maybe not so much. Full disclosure, I have not seen the Twilight movies. I just was not inclined to do that to myself or others. So I didn't watch it. So who knows? Maybe it was actually amazing. You'll have to let me know down in the comments, but I'm not a big fan. I did spend some time watching the Munsters. I think that we got to put, you know, Grandpa Munster here in Camptastic. I think he defines it almost. He is really the prime definition of a Camptastic vampire, which kind of brings us to the portrayal of Dracula in the Castlevania series, which is something I've spent a good deal of time with in my life. And it's a nice combination of absurd, camptastic, authentic. I think I might have to put the Castlevania Dracula up in the GOAT status, man. I love some Castlevania Dracula. If anything, I would have to say he leans more towards the camptastic, but man, he's such a authentic portrayal of such a great portrayal of Dracula through all the series, through the video games, through the anime. I don't know, man. I kind of love, and since they don't have the Marvel Comics Dracula on this list, kind of feel like he embodies that, especially in the Netflix series. I feel like they pulled a bit from that old Dracula cartoon that Marvel Comics put out so long ago. I feel he's got some of that. He's definitely GOAT. While we're on this topic, I don't know if you know me very well, but I'm a huge Christopher Lee fan. I think if there's one Dracula to rule them all, it is the Christopher Lee Dracula. I know people in Europe will instantly agree with me. People here in America might need some convincing. But I'm telling you right now, Christopher Lee Dracula is the Dracula. I love Christopher Lee Dracula. Now, here's something interesting. Bram Stoker's Dracula, Gary Oldman. What I find interesting about Bram Stoker's Dracula, Gary Oldman, I'm just putting them there for the time being so I can talk about both of them. But what I find interesting about these two is that you got to rank these guys separate. You got old Dracula, who honestly embodies authentic, camp, absurd. He's goated, dude. Gary Oldman's Old Man Dracula. And in retrospect, like people, I don't know if people remember this. The internet doesn't seem to remember that people hated Dracula when it came out. Now people regard it as a classic, Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula. But at the time, everybody thought that movie sucked. Like that was the word on the street. But now it's being looked at in rose-colored glasses. I think people have begun to appreciate maybe Old Man Dracula. And maybe I feel like people like the young Gary Oldman Dracula a little more because, you know, he fucks. I mean, let's be honest. You know, he definitely fucks. In fact, he fucks so hard that I feel like we need a separate, you know, like we need like a row on here about Draculas that fuck. Like, let me just say, let's keep it simple. You know, he fucks. You know, this Dracula fucks. And you could say the goats all fuck as well. I think they embody that, but no Dracula really embodies embodies that essence, like the Gary Oldman Dracula in Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula. And to that extent, I think that maybe Count Chocula more fits into there. I think you can also put the Count from Sesame Street in the he fucks category. Clearly, those dudes are definitely virile. You can say that about them. These are definitely superior vampires. I think that the Kiefer Sutherland vampire from Lost Boys definitely belongs in that category as well. And now we have another interesting scenario on our hands. We have Interview with a Vampire. And what I find interesting about Interview with a Vampire is that I think you have all the categories represented. Or at least, I think you have 4 different categories represented in that movie. You have the absurd, which I feel is the Brad Pitt Dracula, the Brad Pitt vampire. The Brad Pitt vampire might be one of, it was the original absurd vampire. Before there was Edward Cullen, there was the Brad Pitt vampire, which is entirely absurd. You have Antonio Banderas, which is firmly camp, a firmly camp established Dracula. And then you have Tom Cruise, who, I think we all know Tom Cruise fucks. He clearly belongs in that category. And then we have a young Kirsten Dunst, who I feel gives actually the most authentic portrayal in the movie. The true horror is expressed in Kirsten Dunst, who does a fantastic job in that movie. Probably the best performance in the whole film. And to wrap this all up, the last vampire that I have experience with that I can talk about here is Blade. Blade's interesting. As you know, we do a lot of Marvel coverage on here, so I'm inclined just to put Blade up at the top. Everybody loves Blade. In fact, if I don't goat him, I'm probably going to run into some heat. But let's just check him. Let's check him. Is he absurd? Yes. Is he camptastic? I'd say so. Is he authentic? Over the 3, because he had 3 films to really flesh out the role, I feel he did actually get a chance to establish himself as authentic. He fucks. He's definitely goated. That's my tier list. Feel free to argue with it down in the comments below. Make sure you like, subscribe, check out all the other great videos on this channel, and grave diggers keep digging.
Come on, to this blasphemous brawl. Dance with the dead and catch your fill of it all.